Palmer, you had an interesting dive. I've seen some other people around here on the beat asking about this. I'm not going to claim I just with my producing wizardry came up with this question on my own, but I think it's a pretty cool hypothetical. The 2021 Georgia National Championship team taking on the 2022 National Championship team. I love this debate because no one will ever get to settle it, and we can talk about it forever. So many people want to compare Georgia's 2021 National Championship team against LSU's 2019 National Championship team. And I think that's an interesting debate as well. And maybe when Jake Rowe's healthy and he's able to come back on, we can get into that one because I think that one could keep us talking for a while too. But the 21 team against the 22 team, one team with a much better defense, another team with a significantly, I don't know if it's even a significantly better offense, but a marginally better offense at least. Palmer, where did you land as you wrote this and found yourself thinking about it and going through all the variables? What sets these two teams apart in your mind?
Man, I didn't really even think about where I landed when I was writing it because I was listening to what these guys on the team, we talked to them at the combine about it and what they had to say. And I was actually, amazed that Robert Beal, who was the team sack leader on the 21 team and that generational defense, he ended up going with the 22 squad versus Kyrus Jackson, who was a part of the better offense, one of the top scoring offenses in school history in 2022. He went with the 21 squad. So wow. I think,
and he had a bigger role on the 22 team.
I would say it was equally big. I mean, he was banged up during.
Here's what I mean by that. He had more significant moments, I would say.
Yes. Yeah,
22 season.
I mean, his catch in the Peach Bowl was significant. His catch against
big game at Mississippi State.
Yep, I think he had a catch against Missouri that was pretty big in setting up the game-winning score there. Yes, you're right. He did have more moments in 2022 than he did 21. I think as I think about it, it is a really good defense against a really good offense. And we saw that happen in 21. We saw the way that Alabama was able to pick apart Georgia's defense in that SEC championship meeting. And, part of me wonders if the 22 offense could do same things to that 21 defense. The players said 21 was more talented, but 22 had more fight. And I think I probably land with, both teams very talented. 21 had a lot of the same talent that 22 did have. Those were combined versus, 22 lost 15 guys to the NFL. I probably would go with 22 because of the offense. And because of another year of experience for Stetson Bennett. I mean, if we're talking first year starter Stetson Bennett versus second year starter Stetson Bennett, I like 22 Stetson. I think that the run game was the running backs were probably more better suited in 21 to actually run the ball, but you had Kenny McIntosh that was great. Out of the backfield. I thought the offensive line was probably a tad bit better in 22 in terms of keeping Stetson on his feet. And you had a developed Brock Bowers. Ultimately, I mean, obviously the big question is, how does George Pickens and A.D. Mitchell, how does that play out? Are we counting them as healthy? Right. It's a hypothetical. It doesn't matter. There is no right or wrong.
I would say. Yeah, I mean that's a huge.
The healthy George Pickens on that 21 squad makes a huge difference.
Okay,
but we saw that a healthy A.D. Mitchell does too.
Let's say the Georgia teams that played in each national championship game. How about that? So if that's the case,
I think A.D. Mitchell was healthier than George Pickens. You were still seeing a limited George Pickens, and I don't think you were seeing a limited A.D. Mitchell.
I think I'm going with the 22 team as well.
Yeah.
and it's more about the DNA of the team that you mentioned, that they had more fight, because that goes back to the spring, or not the spring, but the fall, when Kirby was talking about what he'd already seen as kind of the identity coming out of spring. And that's what he said, that spring and summer camp period was all about, was finding out what the identity of the team was. And he even said back then that he was surprised with how much leadership already existed in the team. And I heard him say that, and I felt like that was just a byproduct of a team that knew what it took to win a championship. You had guys who were younger on that championship team, and they saw a lot of older guys leave, and they learned from them. And they already knew, it was kind of baked in, how to lead and not just rely on the coaches to motivate them and inspire them and hold people accountable. And it seemed like you had more people doing that on the 2022 team. And talent, maybe you had more talent on the 21 team, but you had a team that had been there before on the 2022 team. And your point about Stetson and Monken, like their connection, they had another year to build. There's just a lot of factors there. And I think people look at that 21 defense and they see, this defense was historically great. They were the defensive equivalent of LSU's 2019 offense. How can anyone move the ball on them? But Bama did. Now, Georgia's offense does things differently than Bama did. And before Mechie and Jamison Williams got hurt, that was it. It was just, let's use our big guys. Let's use and not physically big, but let's use our, main weapons here to take apart this Georgia defense. And Georgia is just death by 1,000 cuts on Todd Monken's offense. So I would like to see how the 21 defense stacked up against that kind of attack, where so many guys have to be accounted for. I don't think Georgia's 21 defense went up against an offense like that, because once those receivers went down, Bama did too.
Yeah, I'm torn, man. It's a tough debate, because to me, the defensive line in 21 was incredible, man. I mean, you're talking about Jordan Davis, you're talking about Trayvon Walker, the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. And listen, can Mike
Wyatt was a first rounder?
Jalen Carter
was going to be a first rounder.
You got Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, and Nakobe Dean in that linebacking core, which is insane. Lewis Cine was incredible on the back end. I don't know that there was a huge drop-off bringing in Malachi Starks, though, there. I think that you got an upgrade at the star position with Javon Bullard taking over there. It's tough, man. It really is. It's hard. I tend to lean toward 2022 for two players specifically, and that's Brock Bowers and Stetson Bennett. Just another year with both of them. Another year of experience under their belt. Brock Bowers, as incredible as he was in his freshman year, he was equally as incredible and just knew the college game better in his sophomore year. And so, to me, he's the guy that kind of gets the whole offense going. I think he had a better running back core in 2021 with Zamir and James in there. But, I think probably
you had more backs too. I mean,
right? Sure.
You're very limited in terms of who you could hand the ball off to this year. In terms of running backs, and that's why Bowers ended up getting some carries.
I'm curious, who are you taking when you're talking about offensive line? If you're comparing the two offensive lines,
Tate Ratledge over Erickson.
No, sure. But I guess
I don't know that there's a huge difference between
Jamari and Broderick.
I don't know that there's a huge difference. I mean, we ended up seeing the best version of that Georgia offensive line that we saw in 21 had Broderick Jones in it.
No, I agree.
I mean, Justin Schaefer versus Xavier Truss. I don't know that it's a huge difference. I think Cedric stepped it up this past season and was a tick better. I mean, I don't think there's a huge difference. I think like you said, I think the biggest difference was Stetson and Brock Bowers. And Matthew C. points out Darnell Washington was a much bigger part of the offense in 2022 than he was in 21. I mean, I think Ladd was a force in 22 more so than he was in 21.
He had his highs and lows. He was way more consistent in 21.
He did,
but he wasn't as big of a part of the equation.
That Auburn defender would say that 21.
That Auburn game was filthy. And one thing I will add, if you want to compare these defenses and how they handled matchups like an elite offense, Georgia's 22 squad did not handle Mechie and Williams well. Georgia's 22 squad handled Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka Julian Fleming better, in my opinion, especially in that second half.
Well, yeah, because they knocked him out of the game.
But if you look at his third quarter stats, it wasn't like he was tearing it up.
Yeah, they just dedicated it. I guess Ohio State was the closest facsimile to Georgia's offense.
Yeah,
because they had some weapons. Once Georgia did focus on Marvin Harrison Jr. before they knocked him out, other guys were getting open. I mean, that's just the way.
I mean, that was just the virtue. I mean, that was just by virtue of. I mean, C.J. Stroud was able to extend those plays for 7 seconds.
Yeah, no one really counted on that.
Nobody can cover for 7 seconds.
I also think C.J. Stroud is a better quarterback than Bryce Young.
I'm with you, actually.
And if I was the Carolina Panthers, I'd be taking C.J. Stroud over Bryce Young or Will Levis
or Anthony Richardson.
Anthony Richardson. Someone brought that up on the board. I'm not an Anthony Richardson hater, but I am an Anthony Richardson at number 1 overall in the NFL draft hater. I'm not even going to deny that.
We got to wait to have that kind of a conversation until Roe is on, because I know he's pretty opinionated about it all.
Well, we can
just go to Twitter.
Here's the thing. I pray to God it happens, because I feel like if it doesn't, the Falcons are going to figure out how to do it, and I don't want to see that. So I pray that the Carolina Panthers cannot resist the charms of Anthony Richardson.
I just couldn't believe that there's any possibility that Florida, with all the turmoil that the Gators currently have going on, could possibly have that big of a program marketing boost with everything happening in Gainesville right now, to with everything they have going on, with the players hitting the portal, the coaching staff turmoil, fans freaking out about Billy. Well, we do have the number 1 overall pick in the draft.
Well,
that graphic would be hammered to death on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, but so would the one that said 6 and 7. I mean,
no, I know, but it's like,
you've got coaches that were capable of being NFL coaches. You've got the number 1 overall draft pick. You probably should have been a little bit higher than 6 and 7. I get it, but
yeah.
No, listen. Like I said, this is it's an interesting debate. I mean, not only him, but the 21-22 thing. Jordan Davis was such a difference maker, man. He was so.
Are y'all surprised by the fact that Florida has never had a first overall pick?
I am surprised by that,
because I was surprised by that.
Surprised by that one, and Bama. It's still
Bama hasn't either. Really?
No, they've never had a number 1 overall. And they could. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to really hate on Bryce Young as a number 1 overall pick too much if it happens
this year. That's unfortunate for them.
What's that?
I said Georgia won't go back to back number 1 overall picks.
No, I don't think that was ever going to happen, though. I think that's the plan for a team to trade into that number 1 spot.
I agree. But I still maintain that I do think Jalen Carter may be the top prospect in the draft.
And I think, I mean, as a Titans fan, if he slips out of the top 10 and they don't take him at 11, even with Jeff Simmons there,
I told you what's gonna happen if he slips past the Falcons pick. You know what's gonna happen on the show. We won't be seeing you on the show. We're gonna see it live on the show.
No, we're not. We're just not gonna go live. I'll just know. I'll pencil that in. I wrote on Bloody Tuesday, though. I mean, there's been all these predictions now that Jalen Carter is going to fall out of the top 10. Hottest take that I probably could offer up, because I'm not a hot take guy. I'm just bored by hot takes. But my hottest take is I don't think Jalen Carter is going to fall out of the top 10. I think that is so much.
I don't know that he falls out of the top 5.
Moral, grandstanding that any reporter that really believes that should probably just go back and look at the history of the league and what the GMs do.
I said this on the Bill Shank show last Tuesday. Jalen Carter, say whatever you want about him. Maybe there's a track record to speak to what he's done. Jalen Carter largely was in trouble for participating in the crime that the majority of Americans participate in. The number one crime that everyone participates in.
Yeah.
Yep. And I also said this. I said this today, talking about the whole situation with a friend. If that did not happen in Athens and that other car did not have Georgia football program members in it, there's no questions about Georgia's football culture. If that happens in Dallas and it's got members of, just his friend group or his NFL training squad or whatever, that there's no questions about Kirby Smart's having to answer about Georgia football's culture.
No, it's the fact that the kid is under such a significant magnifying glass. And, I think, and again, I'll reiterate, like I said this last week on the radio, the kid is a lot of people. It takes something pretty profound to happen in their life before they realize that they're not invincible. And this kid, I think, probably for him, this was the moment where he woke up and had to say, look, I'm not just anybody. I'm not Dave. I'm not Dave from Blairsville. Okay?
Yeah, because the cop that let him go definitely didn't send that message to him.
Exactly. Right. Sure. So yeah, I think that sometimes you hope that this is a moment that will propel change in the young man's life. I do.
Yeah. Not just for Jalen, but for a lot of his teammates and for the coaching staff and everyone that has to do that work.